All right, cool.
All right.
Yeah. Let me get these things going.
Cat hairs all. Oh. I must have stepped on 20 Legos on the way out of the house today. My child. My wife is laughing at me as I'm struggling out the door.
Oh, we're rolling. Greetings, everybody. I sitting here kind of fanboying a little bit because this is a very, very, I'm truly honored to be doing this episode. This North Carolinian artistic veteran hails originally from Rocky Mount. To say his legacy within the theater and arts community of North Carolina is unmatched, to me, would be an understatement, and to a lot of people as well. One could perhaps refer to him as the godfather or renaissance man of theater over the state of North Carolina. Standing with over 5 decades of accoladed and decorated experience as a multi-award-winning writer, producer, actor, composer, author, influencer, founder, director, and overall artist. He's also a loving family man as well as a recent heart failure survivor who is not just surviving, but thriving. It is my absolute humble privilege to introduce to you one of my dearest mentors and friends, who is overall an artistic icon of a community and generation. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ira David Wood III.
Oh my gosh, sound like an obituary. Oh my.
Too intimidating? Too upfront? I don't know.
No. But it's, when you sit and listen at a lifetime kind of condensed to a paragraph, it's a little unnerving sometimes. Yeah. You sit there and go, did I do all of that?
Well, it was unnerving. Me yesterday researching your life, feeling like I was back in college. It's like Ira David Wood III, 401, history. But I'm so glad to have you here, and thank you again.
I'm so glad to be had.
Thank you for coming out.
You bet, man.
Let's just start from the beginning. I've got, like I said, my deluge of notes, and we'll use some of them. We won't use some of them. It'll be kind of off the cuff. Early stages for you. Now, I, as a Christmas Carol alumni from way back, like the 30th anniversary era, 04, 05, I knew you as a 9, 10, 11-year-old. So I'm really interested to talk to you now in my mid-20s and just get to know you face to face a little bit more than just all the legacy and everything that you've done for this community. How did it start? Was it just walk me through the beginning stages.
I was a show-off in kindergarten. I think when I knew I had a little bit of theatrical talent was when I had to sing Somebody Loves Me to a little girl I hated in a kindergarten show, and people believed it. I had a lot of fun doing that. I was a future farmer of America in high school, not by choice, but that's just what you did in a rural community in Halifax County where I was born. I went out for sports. I went out for basketball, for football. It didn't do anything for me. And the reason I think was because my dad died when I was 12 years old. And that's a pretty heavy bit of baggage to carry around someone that age because your childhood basically ends. So I didn't have a father figure. I didn't have that male image. And to me, as I watched sports in junior high school and high school, it seemed like a lot of dads were trying to relive their youth through their kids. So since I didn't have a dad, it wasn't, I didn't get the encouragement. So
vicariously speaking, then it was just, yeah.
So we didn't have a drama club. We didn't have theater at our school. So I just started creating plays. I remember redoing The Mask of the Red Death for Halloween and putting it on with a bunch of my classmates, and people liked it, and I became interested in it. When I was 14, a couple of years after my dad died, I remember coming downstairs one morning before school and telling my mom that I wanted to spend my life in theater. I think I knew at 14.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was, but I knew I was captivated by it. And my mom, being a good Southern Baptist, said, sit down and let's pray about it, which we did. And from that moment on, I knew what I was going to do. So when the senior panics hit, and everybody kind of, what am I going to do?
Right.
High school's over, and then 4 years of college is over like that. What am I going to do? I always knew, so I didn't have those senior panics. I had a guidance counselor who came up to me one day in high school and said, David, you belong with a lot of other crazy people like yourself. And I said, well, where would that be?
Yeah.
And he told me about Governor's School of North Carolina. And there were 2 books in our library on theater, and I checked them both out. I compiled a monologue from 2 plays, and I went to audition for Governor's School, and to my utter surprise, I got in. And that summer in Winston-Salem, Governor's School was at Salem College. We were on campus at Salem College for the summer. And that was my first kind of introduction to theater. And while I was there, I heard this Italian man come and speak to us. His name was Vittorio Giannini. He was the first chancellor of this new school that was getting ready to open in Winston-Salem. It was called the North Carolina School of the Arts. It was the first school of its kind in the Western Hemisphere that had dance, drama, music under the same roof with academics. So I used my same monologue. I went and auditioned, and again, I was accepted. And the day I was accepted, I was sitting in vocational agriculture class. I kid you not, we were
In Halifax.
in Enfield, North Carolina.
Okay.
We were literally studying how much liquid drains off of a manure pile over a period of time. I kid you not. And the principal's voice came on the speaker, and he asked me to come to the office. Well, when the principal asks you to do that, you go, oh, he knows something. I'm in trouble. So I left the ag building. I went over to the main building, and I was walking down the hall, this long corridor. And at the other end, I see my mom. So I go, oh, this is serious. I'm in a lot of trouble, I know. And I got to her at the end of the hall, and I just looked at her, and I said, Mom, what is it? What's the matter? And she said, nothing. She said, you've been accepted at the North Carolina School of the Arts, and this is the last time I will see you walk down this hallway. So I left Halifax County for my senior year in high school. And I went to this school that blew my mind. I was a senior in high school in Winston-Salem at this brand new school. And I went there for 4 years of college. And during my college years, I had 4 years in the Lost Colony outdoor drama on Roanoke Island, where I got to put everything I was learning in school into practice. I tell people I had to go to school for 5 years to learn how to breathe properly and to project, and then I could take it every summer to the Outer Banks, stand on a outdoor theater stage and be heard on the back row. And I'd come back to school, hug my speech teachers, and go, you're right. You've taught me how to project, how to breathe. Everybody else was losing their voices, getting sick, and I was sailing through.
Wow.
So, yeah, I learned a lot.
Wow.
I had to take ballet classes in the morning at 8 o'clock. So when I got out of school, I could do things with my body that I just took for granted. I thought, well, sure, everybody, throws their leg up. And now, my gosh, it would take a spatula to get me off the floor if I tried that. But during those years, I was lucky enough to meet some incredible people who helped found the school, movers and shakers in North Carolina, and entertainers, actors. I remember sitting on a sofa with Andre Segovia, the greatest classical guitarist in the world.
Absolutely.
I didn't know who he was. Andre Previn rang a bell, but I was sitting next to Segovia, beautiful man, and I attended his master class because he only taught, I think, 2 or 3 places in the United States. And I walked in and watched him in a master class. And this is the best of the best. And I remember this one kid came in to play for him. He had a music stand in front of him, had his music. He was playing for Segovia, and Segovia had his guitar, and he was sitting there listening. And all of a sudden, he just put his foot out and toppled the music stand, just knocked it over. And everybody went, oh, and the kid was out. I mean, that's it. You're done. He was the best, and he only had time for the best.
Wow.
And
Wow.
yeah, and I think everybody in the class just, whoa.
Wow.
But so many instances like that to learn from. I got to meet Helen Hayes, Jose Ferrer. Out on the Outer Banks, I got to meet Andy Griffith. I used to babysit Andy's kids.
When you were in the Outer Banks, those were show commitments during the summer then?
Yep.
Off time from school.
3 months.
From 65 to 70.
Right.
In that year range.
Yeah, 68 through 71.
Okay, I got
One of my
you.
years on there. And that's 3 months employment, which to me was like a summer vacation.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I could write my shows. In fact, I premiered my first show that I had ever really written down in Manteo. It was called Dilly. It was a children's show, and it was about a little boy who was smaller than the rest of the backyard gang, and he got him into trouble, and they ostracized him, and in his loneliness, he creates an imaginary playmate. And he names the playmate Mr. Bubbs, and Mr. Bubbs takes him to these magical places. And I patterned Mr. Bubbs on Danny Kaye, the performer. Flash forward, I go out to L.A. at one point in my career. I get a map to show you how much I knew about how to do things properly. I drove to Danny Kaye's house, got out of my car, knocked on the door, and Danny Kaye opened it. And I stood there and told him, hi, I'm Ira David Wood. I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina. I've written a play, and I based one of my characters on you.
Wow.
And he was so gracious, and he said, well, I tell you what, I'm cooking for a dinner party. Why don't you come in and tell me about it?
Wow.
And later when I met Sandy Duncan and worked with her in the production Love Letters, knowing that Sandy had worked with Danny Kaye in Pinocchio, I told her about that, and she said, boy, you're lucky. You caught him on a good day. But it was wonderful. I sat in his kitchen for 30 to 40 minutes at least, told him about my show, and he was very interested cooking away. And when I finished, I excused myself and went out, and he said, drop me a letter. Let me know how it goes. And I said, thank you very much. And obviously, I know better now than to just drop in, in Beverly Hills to somebody's house. But it's sometimes what you don't know that opens the doors for you, And I was lucky enough that nobody shot me or, had me arrested during those days. But yeah, my early career was full of a lot of those things. I had, when I graduated from college, an invitation from Andy Griffith to come out to the West Coast and to appear on his series, which he was in at the time, called Headmaster. And he was the headmaster of a school. So I came through Raleigh, and I was waiting to head to the West Coast, and I got a call one day from this man from the Department of Public Instruction, and he said, I'm looking for a young man who wants to change the world and thinks theater's the way to do it. And I said, whoa, you're going to have to give me 5 minutes because I have to call Andy Griffith. And I did. I called Andy, and I thanked him, and I said, Andy, I have to stay. I have to stay in North Carolina. And what are you talking about? And I said, well, I have a chance to go to work for the Department of Public Instruction. I get to go out into high schools all across the state of North Carolina and find people who were just like me, who got ostracized when I was in high school because maybe I wanted to practice the piano more than football. And I said, they're out there just like I was. It's important for me to find them and let them know there's a place they can go where they're around people who share their own love, their own passion. Because Helen Hayes said to me, and it always reverberated in my brain. She said, David, we lose some of our greatest talent early on because they can't take the abuse from their peers. And it's very true. I mean, it's still out there in the schools. The bullying, is a big issue these days. And now the frightening thing is those kids who are being bullied are picking up rifles and going back into schools. So they're fighting back in a horrendous sort of way. But if you look at so many of these instances of shootings, you're going to find that these kids were bullied, and it's a frightening thing. So I was very lucky and very happy to be able to stay in North Carolina and do that, because North Carolina gave me an incredible start. It gave me Governor's School, the Lost Colony Outdoor Drama. It gave me the North Carolina School of the Arts. And my agriculture teacher, who I quote more than Shakespeare, taught us that you can take and take and take from the soil, but unless you put something back into the soil, you'll deplete the earth and nothing new will grow. So that stayed with me, and I felt like that was something that I had to do, was put something back, give something back. It's like going back to school and giving that teacher a hug, and everybody has that teacher in their lives.
Absolutely.
And to go back and to say thank you, that's what they live for.
Yeah.
So I had a year there at the Department of Public Instruction, and was asked during my tenure to come over and become director of the Children's Theater of Raleigh, which was the oldest children's theater, I think, in North Carolina and maybe the Southeast. It was formed back in 1947.
Now, in your timeline, this is after graduating?
Yeah, and this is after that first year with the Department of Public Instruction. And it was a wonderful job going back and meeting these kids and turning them onto theater and dance and music. But I was still, I guess, a racehorse in a stable, and I knew I wanted to get back into theater. So when Children's Theater hired me, I said, I want to expand the scope of the theater. The audience was about, I think, between 5,000 and 6,000, maybe a year. I said I want to turn it into a family theater, at which we did. And first production we did was an outdoor production in Raleigh's Rose Garden Amphitheater. We did a production of Hamlet in modern dress, and we played to. It was 7,000 or 8,000 people for that one production. So. The audience grew from, I think, 5,000-6,000 the first year to between 16,000-20,000 just by enlarging the scope. And we were doing a season of Shakespeare at the theater because that was the only playwright we could afford. We had no money. So Shakespeare was royalty free.
Can't go wrong,
Yeah. So we were getting to the Christmas season, and Shakespeare had not penned a Christmas show. So I went to the second best English author, and I said, let's do an original version of A Christmas Carol. Let's do it as a musical comedy. Let's attract entire families to come to see it. And we opened in 1974, and this year will mark the 45th year. So staying in Raleigh turned out to be a wonderful adventure for me. Again, meeting incredible people. Spending a little time on the West Coast, back and forth for a while, coming back here after getting married to raise a family. I knew I didn't want to raise a family in Hollywood. I wanted to come back to Raleigh, to the South. You ask anybody for a ham hock in New York or L.A., they'll send you to a pawn shop, I had to come back to some Southern food. I've never regretted it. I think I could have had a career in L.A., in New York, but being here has been a blessing in so many ways. That's it. Goodbye. Done.
That's just one question.
Yeah. Well, you know actors. You ask us a question, 2 hours later you're dozing, and I'm still talking.
The great thing is you just knocked out about a third of the bullet points.
Ah, well, that's good. See?
So
I've done this before, Jason.
I have no doubt. You're making this job very easy.
Good.
I do want to go back to the founding of Theater of the Park, 1972. 2 years before ACC, A Christmas Carol, started. I think after that incredible monologue with the first question of just talking about the rationale of why you started doing what you were doing, I saw in another interview that you saw a void of other theaters in the area at the time not doing shows during Christmas. When you founded TIP, was it a similar reasoning as far as just walk me through the vision of how you founded that theater and why?
Well, we didn't have a home. The Children's Theater of Raleigh, before we changed the name to Theater in the Park, did not have a home.
Gotcha.
We went around to various junior high schools, and performed. The first thing they asked me to do at the Children's Theater was a rock musical. And they said, we want you to go to New York, pick a rock musical out, and we'll do it. And I said, I don't need to go to New York. I said, let me go into every city school in Raleigh. Let me do my assembly program. I had kind of a stand-up thing that I did on theater and imagination. And I said, and then after I do that, I will make the announcement that we'll have auditions after school.
Wow.
If kids want to come back to the auditorium, I'll be here. We had 700 kids audition, and we ended up with a cast of 200 people.
Jeez.
But that's the band, which was a pretty big band.
Sure.
That's tech crew, and that's performers on the stage. And then I got 27 writers from schools all around the city of Raleigh, and we met for a week to write this rock musical. And I said, my only instructions to them were, I want you to write this play as though you're sitting down with your parents and you're able to say to them all the things that are locked in your heart that you've never been able to say. Write that down on paper. So it turned out to be a series of scenes. And what developed was, and this is pre-Tommy, the rock opera Tommy.
Yeah.
What developed was a central character who went through a series of life-altering events, and we didn't have a name for the character. So I said, well, just use the letter X. That'll be him. So when we got through, we were figuring out what to name this musical. And I said, well, let's call it X, E-K-S. And everybody said, well, why not? So it was a story of the central character, X, who's born into the world, and he can only say one word, and the word is why, which is an incredible word.
Yeah.
So he's put in all of these life-altering situations, but it begins as innocuous as a teacher saying 2 + 2 is 4. Why? Well, it just is. Yeah, but why? So, this people don't know how to treat this kid, And then later, these intellectuals start to read things into why. Oh boy, this guy's got
existential
an agenda. Yeah. So he eventually heads this major corporation, and eventually he's president of the United States. There's an assassination attempt, and he survives it, and they are bringing him back to the stage at the end of this rock opera as the next Messiah. And he's being born on the shoulders of people with palm leaves, and they get him up on the stage, and we had a plant in the audience right in the middle of this big musical number. This guy gets up in the audience, and he goes, hey, and everybody stops. And he goes, I've been sitting here for 2 hours listening to a rock opera. All I'm hearing this guy say is why. And he looks at the guy and he says, I got a message for you. Why not? And he turns and walks out of the theater. And all the other characters on stage start kind of looking at each other going, whoa. And they start trickling off the stage. And finally it becomes a mass exodus. They're following the next guy who's got a better message. And the stage is sort of destroyed. The set is destroyed as they leave. And the central character is left on the stage, just sitting Indian style on the stage, looking at the audience in silence for a while. And then he just says, why? And that was it. We didn't close the curtain. We didn't close the lights. He just sat there until somebody in the audience, and then everybody started standing ovation, cheering.
Wow.
The audience left, and the Children's Theater Board of Directors was standing out front, and they still talk about it. They said people just threw money in our hands. We've never had this kind of money in our life. So that's the way it started. But I have to say, at the same time, before that musical opened, the lady who was head of the board of directors of the Children's Theater, when that musical was written, I was asked by the board to come in and read the play to them for them to approve it. And when I finished reading, this lady turned to the board and said, if you vote to do this production, I will resign. And they voted unanimously to do it, so she had to walk.
Yeah.
And I was called a communist, a degenerate. I was going to be run out of Raleigh on a rail, and these were headlines in the News and Observer a week before we opened.
Jeez.
I would wake up in the morning and just go, I don't think I want to see this.
Well, it's funny because there's the rock star motto, or any press is good press.
Yeah,
in a way. But that's starting out like that.
Yeah, it was tough, and a lot was riding on it, and I realized it. But I knew it was a tempest in a teapot. I knew when people saw it,
right,
it was going to be a hit, and it was. And so they asked me to come on board and become executive director. That's when I said I'm going to change the name, broaden the scope. The next production we did was Hamlet in the Rose Garden. And then the year after that, we did Richard III and Meredith at their outdoor amphitheater and played to almost 20,000 people on opening night. But see, it was July the 4th, and everybody wanted to come and celebrate. But seeing Shakespeare, Raleigh seeing Shakespeare, which was another thing. I was told at the outset, when I wanted to do Hamlet, I was told, no uncertain terms, Raleigh won't cross the street to see Shakespeare. And I said, oh, you're wrong. You're wrong. We got to do it. And I walked people around the Rose Garden, and I said, we'll invite people to bring lawn chairs, and they'll sit here, and we'll have strolling musicians with their guitars and flutes and things, and they'll go here. And it all happened just the way. I think sometimes it's hokey. It's like Field of Dreams, build it and they'll come. And it was true. Raleigh was hungry, I think, for Shakespeare again. And that kind of entrepreneurship, I think, bled over then into A Christmas Carol, where I looked around and I said, boy, all the theaters are closed over the holidays. And that's a shame, because families won't do things together over the holidays. So I think that was the key to our early success, and the rapid growth was because we simply looked for voids to fill, which I think any entrepreneur does. And they were there and very evident. So we just stepped into the void and said, well, let's open our doors for the holidays. And by that time, we had doors. We found the Pullen Park Armory building in the northern sector of Pullen Park, catch-all, day camp, dog obedience class, astronomy class, judo class. I said, this is a theater. we pushed Parks and Recreation hard to get that building. The head of Parks and Recreation at the time was this beautiful man. I adored him, Frank Evans, because he was a dreamer too. He saw the northern end of Pullen Park, and he said, I want to make this focus of this northern sector of the park the arts. So I went, oh my gosh, this is wonderful.
That's great.
But pushed and pushed. I remember one day sitting in his office with a group of people, and that man put his finger in my face, and he said, if you go in that building today, I will have you arrested for trespassing. You're pushing too hard. And I said, I have to push. I have to push. So I said, you all understand baseball bats and baseballs and footballs. You don't understand Shakespeare. You don't understand theater. And we need this place. So we got it eventually.
Wow.
And Tennessee Williams actually came to Raleigh to see a show in our theater called Tennessee's Waltz, which was an original compilation of his poetry. Well, when the city heard Tennessee Williams was coming, they drove trucks over to the building and built a lobby for us because we didn't have anything. When you walked in, it was a gym.
Yeah.
I think one of the first shows we did there was Cyrano de Bergerac, and we had a sword fight in the play.
This is classic.
Well, it was only referred to in the script as a 100-man sword fight, but I said, let's put it in the play because this will be fun to try to stage. We did it in black light and to music.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And when the blade struck in black light, sparks flew, which you couldn't normally see in regular lighting.
Right.
So we did Cyrano, but the scoreboard was still up, where they played basketball in the Armory building. So I said, well, there it is. We may as well use it. So when Cyrano would stab somebody, home got a point, and we just kept going. So it's using what you have, and people loved it, and the audiences just started to grow. Christmas Carol, I think we were 3 years in that building. Which we then decided, let's change the name of the group to Theater in the Park, because we're in Pullen Park, one of the oldest parks in the world. It's the 14th oldest park in the world. And wow. I saw Pullen Park at the time, and I would preach to city councils and the mayors. I said, this is Central Park one day. This is going to be the oasis in the middle of a gigantic city that's going to grow around this green, beautiful space. And now we have the Dorothy Dix property that they're going to turn into a park. So I am so excited and proud of Raleigh for investing in its future by emphasizing this beautiful land that's going to be priceless one day. Not in my lifetime, but I know the city is going to grow around this space, and it'll be our Central Park. We're going through right now in our sector of the park a $7.5 million renovation. The Arts Center, which is right across the street from us, is getting totally renovated and expanded, and the Gregg Museum, which is now right a stone's throw from the theater, where they've taken the old Chancellor's House from State University and turned it into an art museum. So Frank Evans' dream of having the northern end of Pullen Park, an artistic oasis, is really starting to happen.
Wow.
So yeah, it's nice. I'll be 72 this November. And it's a lifetime. It's taken a lifetime to see this happen. And I'm thankful that I got to live this long to see it. I think future generations, I hope, realize the battles that were fought to get us to where we were. It's something I've learned about this business. I'm sure you have, because you know, we stand on the shoulders of people who came before. When I came to Raleigh, there was a group of adults in town who were amazingly talented, beautiful people who I came to love and respect, and I worked with them, and they're all gone now. And I doubt that too many people in the theater community even know their names. but they live in the work that I do, and I think to that degree they will live in the work that people who work with me do, because we pass it along. Each one teach one, I think, has always been a great motto, a slogan, something, whatever, to live by.
Sure.
I've always felt that I didn't have a profession, I had a ministry.
And I was just going to ask, is it safe to say, not to ask a closed-ended question, but is it, from what I'm hearing, is it safe to say that perhaps you're a change agent first, then an artist, and it was just a way for you to...
Yeah, I think, that's an interesting question. I think...
Based on what I'm hearing, because I never had a chance to know this history until now.
Yep. I think there is an artistic way to affect change, and I think that's what you want, I think, in a situation like that. Anybody that has an ounce of creativity, Bronte once said, and I love the quote, "The person who possesses the creative gift owns something of which they're not always master." You know that because you'll wake up in the middle of the night, you got a tune, you got something in your head, you got to get to the...
It's never ending.
Yeah, you got to get to the instruments. It has to happen. Yeah. So sometimes it directs you. A lot of times you're running down the hill in front of a boulder rolling behind you, pretending you're directing.
What a great analogy. What a great analogy.
Well, it's going to happen, and if you're fortunate enough to be in front of that boulder, you're going to get a little credit for it.
Yeah. In your opinion, what is the boulder?
The boulder is that dream. The boulder is
the vision quest.
Yeah, that life force, that burst of creativity that is following somebody who's got the determination, who's got the passion, and that's what you need. And I've always said, over now 50-some years in this business, when young people come to me and they say, "Give me advice," I'm thinking of going into the theater. What's your best advice? And it's always this: if you want to be an actor, don't. Run away. If you have to be an actor, God bless you. That's the difference. Some people know I'm born for this. When I walked into the School of the Arts as a senior in high school, I found a square foot of universe that belonged to me. For the first time in my life, I was around people who shared my love and passion and devotion. I can remember doing so much at the School of the Arts. I was in a play once, Duremant's The Visit, which is a pretty heavy play, and I had the lead in it. And I wore a coat and a vest. I was doing Drosselmeyer in the Nutcracker Ballet, and I was also directing the school's first opera. And I was skin and bones. I mean, I was exhausted. I had smelling salts in the pocket of my vest, open, so I wouldn't pass out on the stage. But you couldn't stop. And you would crawl back to your dormitory at night, just ready for the bed. You'd pass somebody's room, and maybe it'd be a bunch of dancers in there, and they are debating whether or not Baryshnikov or Nureyev was the greatest dancer. But you'd crawl into the room and just collapse in a corner because you wanted to hear it. I was just soaking up everything like a sponge. And I'm still that way. I find that I get 4 hours of sleep. I was up this morning at 4 until about 6 at the computer working.
Right.
Went back to bed, woke up and went, whoa, got to get on the road for Jason. So, yeah, you're still pumping it out. You're still doing it. You're still hopefully touching hearts, changing lives, making people feel better for having spent a little time with you in a theater, in a dark room. Because what we do is this is the process of communication. And that's what the arts are. We're communicating. So it's very important, number one, to know what the hell you're communicating, what you're talking about, what's your message, what's your sermon of the day, and how are you going to get it done?
You just hit another bullet point. What is art? What is the essence of great art?
Great art, and that's a difference to me. The rudimentary process, it's a process of communication. Dance, music, drama. We're communicating. I think occasionally that process of communication goes a dimension deeper, and it becomes what I call communion. That's when souls meet on a wavelength. That's when hair stands up on the back of your neck. Maybe you get it at the Alleluia chorus. I don't know, when you hear an incredible piece of classical music, or you see that dancer defy gravity for that millisecond suspended in air. I know people who've walked into museums and seen works of art. I know a kid who was going to commit suicide and saw a painting and changed his life. So
it's the intangible or the tangible intangible.
It's lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
And when you get it, you know you've got it. It's like Olivier. It's a great story of Laurence Olivier. I tell my Olivier stories. People make fun of me now because I tell so many, but there was a great story of Olivier having done Richard III. And Laurence Olivier, arguably the greatest classical actor of the 20th century, storms off stage after his Richard III. He goes into his dressing room, takes his wig off, throws it, peels his big nose off and throws it down. He's sitting at the dressing table with his cold cream, getting the grease paint off. And John Gielgud comes into the dressing room. He says, Larry, my God, listen to them. They're still applauding. They're standing. For God's sake, what are you doing? Go back, get another bow. Olivier says, no. And he says, but it was marvelous tonight, Larry. My God. He said, you were Richard III. And Olivier turns around and he said, yes, I know, damn it. But how do I do it again? And that's every artist, when you get that lightning in a bottle, you go, oh my God, will it happen tomorrow night? Will I walk out and get that same feeling? Will I get that same rush? Will that silence happen, that stillness where the magic begins to happen and that communion process starts to go? Olivier lived long enough for me to meet that man, which is one of the greatest moments of my life. And I got to tell him, because Olivier said, you can't have one of those moments with an audience of over 1,000 people. And I got to tell him, I said, there's a community theater in Raleigh, North Carolina that gets it every year. Told him about that moment in A Christmas Carol that to me wraps up everything.
Push up against the...
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Push up against the air.
I put your hand out and
it will come back.
It just hits you. And 2,000 people for a few seconds hold their breath. And it's just stillness out there. And that's why I've always said to the cast, I hold that moment as long as I can, because if you want to know what Christmas is, it'll roll right across that stage. And I got to say that to him. I have to say, I'll tell you the story of that.
Please do.
My sister's in the Academy, and she asked one year, she said, would you like to go to the Academy Awards? And I went, well, I guess I can squeeze you in.
Yeah.
So we went out to L.A. and...
she's out in Hollywood.
Yeah. Got to the Four Seasons lounge at the hotel and had the limo pick us up there. We had to drive, I wouldn't say 6 or 7 blocks to get to the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, but it took us about an hour.
I was going to say about an hour in LA.
Yeah, about an hour, because you're in a line of limos. And but the great thing was we were sitting in the back watching the TV, and there was a limo ahead of us with a TV crew, and the guy got out with a camera, and it was a point of view to show the TV audience what everybody saw when they got out of their limos and walking in. So we knew where we were going to go when we got there. Limo pulled up, And I got out first, and the driver went to let my sister out, and she had to come around the car. But when I stepped out on the curb, I turned to my left, and Sally Fields was standing there. And she was up for Norma Ray that year. And everybody knew she was going to win. So I just turned to Sally, and I said, Sally, you look beautiful tonight. And she was, oh, thank you so much. And I said, you know you're going to leave with one of these things tonight. And she went, oh, don't say that. You may jinx it. I said, there's no way we're going to jinx it. Well, by that time, my sister's with me, and we start walking in with Sally, chatting Sally Fields up like we've known her all our life. We get inside Dorothy Chandler, and Carol says, hey, let's call Raleigh. Call Mom in Raleigh and let her know we're in the Academy Awards. So we went to a phone booth because there were no cell phones then. Called Mom, said, Mom, we're at Academy Awards. And Mom said, yes. I know, I just saw you walk in with Sally Fields. And my friends out in L.A. would not get off my back for a week. They said, Sally Fields. But the thing is, you go through all that security, and once you're in, you can go anywhere inside. So I'm sitting there watching the Academy Awards, and it's thrilling when they go to commercial. This army of technicians come out, and they change everything on the set, and it's amazing. And right at the very end, they announced the Academy Award for the Best Picture. And they said, presenting the award, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lord Laurence Olivier. And he walked out on stage, and I just went back in my chair, put my hand over on my sister's knee, and just looked at her, and she said, I know. Said, we'll get down there. We'll meet him. I said, I have to meet this man. He was very old. He was infirm then. There is somewhere in my house a videotape because my mom taped the show here. And as the credits are rolling, two people are running down the aisles of the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion to the stage. It's Carol and me, and we go up on the stage with all the movie stars. Literally, I am elbowing Gregory Peck, Burt Lancaster, and Kirk Douglas out of the way trying to find Olivier. And I hear somebody on the stage go, David Wood, is that you? And I turned around, it was Tommy Holtz. Now, Tommy was up for Amadeus that year, the movie Amadeus. I hugged him. Oh, Tommy's so proud of you, man. It's just, where's Olivier? And he said, stage left. He said, but get there fast because he's very tired and they got to take him to his limousine. I said, okay. Carol and I barrel off stage, left. We get to the dressing room. The door is open. There are two uniformed policemen on either side, a man in a tuxedo standing in front with a walkie-talkie. I can see God sitting in the chair. That's Olivier was God. And Joan Plowright, his wife, is in there with him. I figured the guy doesn't know me from Adam. So I walked up to him, and he said, may I help you? And I said, yes, I'd like to see Larry, please. Then the guy said, well, I wish I could let you in, but unfortunately he's very tired, not seeing anyone. The only person who came in was Gregory Peck, who produced the show that year, and he said, we got to take him out to his limo in a minute. So I said, well, I certainly understand. And I stepped back and turned to my sister, and I said, don't move, because he's got to come past us to get out. A couple of minutes later, the guy got a message on his walkie-talkie, and he raised his voice so everybody could hear, and there was a corridor that went, I swear, in my brain, in my memory, it went for miles. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, will you open up a path for us, please? We're going to bring Lord Olivier. We need to take him to his limousine. So the Red Sea parted, and everybody, the silence engulfed this hall. And Olivier stood up, and he shuffled through the door, and he was coming right by me. And I thought, oh, if you don't do it now, you've lost a chance.
Yeah.
So I just reached out and stroked his shoulder, and he stopped, and he kind of straightened up and started to turn to look at me. And God turned sound down in the universe. I mean, everything got quiet, and I was looking at him. And as he turned, I saw Heathcliff and Hamlet and Richard III and all of these characters just go until he wow, he hit me with those baby blues, and he had blue eyes. I never realized that. And it shot, when he made eye contact with me, it shot down to my toes and back up. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. And all I could think about was, oh my God, this man is old and sick, and he can still do that with his presence. What must it have been like to be on stage with him when he was in his 20s or 30s and 40s? It must have been a whiff of the ether that God reserves for himself. But he looked at me, and something happened. Carol said later on, said, you guys made peace or something. And he lifted his arm and just held his arm out to me. And okay. And I stepped in and took his arm. He put his hand on top of mine, and we started to walk together.
Wow.
Down this corridor. And I just remember looking and passing Gregory Peck and everybody. Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas, Willie Nelson was in the crowd. I can remember Stevie Wonder was there, standing in the hall. And even Stevie knew when something went by him.
Something was going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That man had that quality. We got to the porte-cochere finally, where the limo was. His driver came around to open the door, and I waved him away. I said, got it. Opened the door, and I helped Olivier in, then I helped Joan Plowright in. Then I realized I hadn't said anything. And I went, I have to say something.
Man.
So I leaned in the car, and I was just in my brain, I was going, oh, please let me put the right verb behind the right noun. I got a few minutes, and I want to tell this man everything.
Yeah.
And I looked at him, and I looked at Joan first, and I said, I just want to thank him. And she turned to him, and she said, Larry, this young man has something to say to you. And he turned to me and reached his hand out, and I put my hand in his, and the tears were already coming.
Yeah.
And I looked at him, and I said, for all you have meant to me and my life, and for what I know you will mean to generations to come, I love you, and I thank you. And tears came in his eyes, and he put his other hand on top of mine, and he looked at me, and he said, no, dear boy, you are tomorrow. You are my dream. God bless you. And I stood back, closed the door, the limo drove away, and I broke down. I stood there and wept, and I can still weep thinking about it, because when somebody touches your life like that, and you can say thank you, you can say I love you and I thank you. That was everything to me. Because what that man gave me through his performances and was incalculable. I wanted to be him. I wanted to imitate him. I just watched every nuance. So that was my moment with Olivier, and I will treasure it until the day I die, and so thankful that fate, God, whatever, put us there so I could say thank you. And that's why I say to everybody, all performers, go back to that person, go back to that teacher in that elementary school that kind of reached up and grabbed you by the scruff of the neck and shook some sense into you and maybe turned you on to music or dance or drama. Thank them, because that's what they live for. They don't get paid a king's ransom.
Yeah.
They do it because they have passion. They have a love for it.
They have to.
Yeah.
They just have to.
Of course they do. But that's theater, I mean, live performances, and you know that too. Same thing with music. It exists in the moment. When you're playing to an audience and they're listening, they're giving back to you that attention, that love, that applause, and that affects you, and so you return the favor, and that becomes that cyclitic thing that I think is part of that communion process when they reward you with laughter and tears and sometimes dead silence, which is powerful in and of itself. But you know that feeling when you're on the stage, and it's a powerful feeling too, because you can take people and move them. You sing one song and it affects people a certain way, and you can turn around and switch the entire mood. There's an interesting story about this one song. It was called Blue Monday, and they played it during the 40s, during World War II. And then they took it off the air because they found out that the suicide rate went up when Blue Monday was played on the radio.
Wow.
What they figured was the juxtaposition of certain notes in a certain sequence produced a psychological effect on people. That's pretty powerful. When you can take the artistic process and reduce it to science to that degree, that's kind of amazing. I knew a performer, his name was Sidney Blackmer. He was from North Carolina, a big Broadway star. He was in the movie with Edward G. Robinson. I think one of the last things he did was Rosemary's Baby. Great movie. But he was a North Carolina actor. And he often said to me, he said, if you play that scene in position 1, the audience won't cry. But if you play it in position 5,
Jesus,
they'll cry. That's what I said.
Dude.
He had a circle 360 degrees, and that man knew I could do it the same way with the same emotional level, but if I did it this way, the audience wouldn't cry. But if I turned that way and gave them an angle, they cried.
Man.
I looked at that man, I said, whoa, you have forgotten probably more about theater than I'll ever learn. And he had a beautiful story, too. He went to New York, as everybody does at some point. He was sleeping on a park bench in Central Park, stuffing his shoes with newspaper because he had holes in them. But he persevered and eventually became a big Broadway star and a movie star. But he turned to booze at one point. He fell into the bottle, and he was in a bar in New York, and he had ordered a whiskey, and a guy had just served him the whiskey. And a waiter came over, and in these days, the waiters wore the white gloves and they had the silver trays when they served. And this waiter came over with a tray with a business card on it and said, "This is for you," and walked away. And Sidney, sitting at the bar with his glass of whiskey, picked the card up, and it said, "Oh, Sidney, not you, too." And he turned the card over, and the name printed on the card was John Barrymore. And he looked over in the booth, in the shadows of this bar, and Barrymore in his cups, sitting there with tears rolling down his face, looking at Sidney Blackmer. And Sidney said, "I took my whiskey, toasted him, turned it upside down on the bar, got up, walked out, and he said, I never took another drink." And so, but in this business, everybody has those stories. The people that you meet in the arts are the most beautiful people in the world, with time to give, time to teach. I have found the bigger they are, the more unselfish they seem, the more time they took with you, like walking into Danny Kaye's house, like having that beautiful moment with Olivier, sitting down with Hollywood directors and asking them, what makes a star? What is that quality? And being able to get on the back lots in Hollywood, it was so funny. I went out to Hollywood with 4 scripts. All of them were picked up by theaters in Hollywood, and I was doing a lot of writing in those days. And at lunchtime, I had an envelope that I had found in the trash, a big MGM logo on it, and I would put papers in it. And about 1 o'clock after the lunch hour, I'd drive to Culver City and drive to the MGM studios and hold that envelope so the guard could see MGM. And everybody's kind of coming back after lunch. I'd fall in the crowd with him, walk by, give him a wave, and I was on the back lot at MGM, man. And I had the run of it, which was, I mean, pretty thrilling in those days. And that was, you know, my entree into films was being lucky enough to be cast as Barry, the character Barry in Brainstorm, which was Natalie Wood's boyfriend in her last movie that she made. Mm-hmm. And again, got to meet and work with, of course, Natalie.
I've got Christopher Walken,
yeah,
Burt Reynolds.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any, if we could deviate any funny quick stories on them or.
Oh, Burt. I was on BL Stryker with Burt, and he was amazing. He was directing the episode I was in, as well as playing Stryker, BL Stryker. And we had a fight scene. I was fighting Burt Reynolds. Yes, I know. The magic of the movies. But
at least you're not doing the whipped cream with Dom DeLuise on.
No, but Dom I did meet later. Dom DeLuise almost signed on as Jacob Marley in A Christmas Carol.
Really?
Yeah. He was at the Angus Barn, and I saw him one night and introduced myself. We sat down, and I had him in hysterics talking about the show. It turns out that his wife, Carol, played Mrs. Cratchit in a theater production out on the West Coast.
Wow.
So, yeah. But anyway, I was doing this episode with Burt, and we had a fight scene coming up, and the fight coordinator walked over to me and he said, well, here's what's going to happen. You know, you give him this and this and then the knee and blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, yeah, okay, I think I got it. And yeah. I'm standing there. Burt comes over, and he's setting the cameras up, and he says, okay, we get ready. And I said, whoa. When we going to run through this? And he said, nah, you're going to be fine. So I'm going, oh, man, I'm going to fight Burt Reynolds, and we're not even going to walk.
No rehearsal.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there, and we're squaring off, getting ready to do it. And the cameras aren't rolling yet.
Crew of like 40, 50 people. No
yes.
pressure.
No
pressure.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there, and I said, under my breath, I went, Burt. He said, what? I said, can I ask you something? He said, sure. Because he had to knee me in the crotch. That was one of the things he was doing. And I said, can I ask you something? He said, yeah. I said, look, I'm not wearing a cup, okay? I said, you're not like one of these old firehouse dogs. When the alarm rings, you go nuts. And he had that high-pitched laugh, that he just started squeezing. I said, because we got the family jewels here. You got to be careful. So, but again, I learned from him. He was a director. That crew that worked for Burt Reynolds, if he told them to take rifles and go over and rob Wells Fargo Bank across the street, they would have done it. They loved him, and he loved them, and the work ethic, everything was great. When Dom DeLuise would come and work for Burt, the outtakes of Cannonball Run, if you ever watch them, they're hysterical because he slaps poor Dom DeLuise.
I mean, the end is just it's just priceless.
And he beats poor Dom up. And but he would sit the crew down before Dom would show up on location, and he'd say, okay, everybody, I mess with Dom, and we have a thing. We just are going to cut up. Nobody else gets involved. You have a job to do. You do your job. But we're going to get the best work out of each other because that's the way we work. So he had the rules, but boy, when you see them together, you're on your knees laughing because they would just crack up. And Dom, by the way, this is another great story. There was a big celebration for the troops out at Carter Finley Stadium years ago. And they got Burt Reynolds to come. They got a lot of stars to come. And Burt got on the phone and got Dom DeLuise to come. So Dom was going to arrive in his limousine down in Carter Finley Stadium near the clubhouse. Well, a few days before Dom arrived, there was a big story in Inquirer magazine about Dom DeLuise is gay and, blah, blah, blah. He's got this lover or something. I don't know. So Burt.
It's like fuel for the fire.
Of course. Burt goes out and buys 200 copies of the National Enquirer, and he gets 200 people to stand on either side of the road with these open copies of the National Enquirer when Dom DeLuise is driven down to the field house in his limousine. Well, when they open the door, DeLuise just falls out on the ground. He's just wheezing. He's laughing so hard. And then there's a lot of hugging.
He's got that wheeze, too.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
I hear it.
And then, after he kind of pulled it together, Reynolds said, well, that's your dressing room, so I'll see you later. And, of course, Dom goes up to the dressing room. There's the star on the door, Dom DeLuise. He opens the door. It's a broom closet. And that was Burt. That was Burt and Dom.
Oh.
So lots of stories like that. Yeah.
Well, not to digress, but to go back to Christmas Carol real quick, because I'm curious. I mean, we've got over 2 million people to date that have seen the show. Started in the Black Box Theater, obviously, then switched to Memorial within a few years of the running. It's remarkable. Can you walk me through the writing process of, because you composed the music, from what I remember. 15 plus years ago when I was in it, that was one of the things that, even at 10 years old, I heard you play piano for a split second, and I don't know, running arpeggios or running some scales. Just
that's all I know. If you hear me play, it's only for a split second. But we wrote the show in less than a week because Dickens had given us all the dialogue.
Right.
So, and I think people are generally surprised at how much literally comes out of the book.
You wrote the music in a week?
Yeah. Terry Mann, J.K. Farrell, and I worked on that script. Terry Mann wrote the music to Once a Year, which the Cratchit family sings. I did the lyrics. We had the opening song I had written while I was at School of the Arts for a Christmas television special that I put together for WSJS television. And so the music kind of came together rather quickly. We've discarded as many songs as are currently in the show.
I'm sure.
Over the years. The last song was the lullaby, and we were at my house one night. Again, it was one of those late nights, and I said to Terry and J.K., I said, I want to write a lullaby for Bob Cratchit to sing to Tiny Tim, and I want it to be a lullaby that any parent would words that any parent would want to say to their child. So that's I sat down at the piano, and my dad's picture was on the wall right above me, and and as I said, he had died when I was 12. So I said, these are the words I never heard. So I started writing and just kind of singing and putting it together. And it was, one day, my son, when you're grown, you will remember all the happy times you and your dad have known. And on the day that you do, you'll know somehow I'm remembering too all my happy times with you. The words came very easily. The tune was very simple. All the music in A Christmas Carol is so simple. Again, because I said I want it to be music that people can hum on the way out. Just don't try to do, any complicated stuff. So it was bop, 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 at the beginning, the waltz kind of stuff. But we finished the lullaby. We were crying. Hugging each other. We had 2 bottles of cold duck, and we drank the bottles together, celebrating. Called everybody we knew, like at 2 a.m, and said, "Get up, you have to hear this." And we'd put the phone near the piano and we'd play it, and sing it. And that's been a beautiful part of my life. It's a Christmas gift to myself every night on the stage when we do the show. I tell the lighting designer, I put the lights over on stage left on Bob Cratchit and Tiny Tim and take them out on us. Yeah. I want to sit in the dark because it's my one time that I can kind of glance out into the audience. Yeah. And one night I saw a grandfather, a father, and a grandchild sitting together on the front row. And while this song was sung, I saw the grandfather the grandchild was sitting between them. I saw the grandfather reach out and touched the shoulder of his grown son. And then I saw them both touch the grandchild in the middle.
Jeez.
And I lost it.
Yeah.
Because I said, that's it. That's it. If that song can say to people, enjoy each other, love each other while you can, because this moment in time it doesn't last. And if you can recognize the treasure of being in the moment with the people that you love, then that's Christmas, and that's a gift that I give myself by giving to you. Because I tell you, I've learned it, and I've said it to every cast, the gift is always to the giver. You give, you get back. I mean, when people say, oh, you must be exhausted. Oh, it just must be such a tiring thing to do a Christmas carol. And it is, but I say to people, gosh, it's the most selfish thing I do all year, to stand on that stage, feel that love come across, make people laugh, make people cry in the same couple of hours that you're together, really take them through a gambit of emotions, because at Christmas time, oh my God, we are all ready to come in and blow the carbon out of our pipes. I think it's a very emotional time for people.
Extremely.
And I've said this too, during Christmas, sometimes we're kind of melancholy and we don't know why. I think it's because when we're in the moment celebrating Christmas present, we're just so caught up in that being there and getting Christmas dinner ready and wrapping presents and being with the family and going here and going there.
There's an expectation almost.
Yes. We have no claim on the future.
Right.
Because we don't know. What we do have is the past. Everybody associates a Christmas. There is a Christmas past that you remember, that's locked in your heart. Just one of the reasons all of the decorations go in the same spot every year. You're creating that past again. When you do that and you're so attuned to the past, you are also thinking of loved ones who are no longer with you. Mothers, fathers, grandmothers, family members, friends.
Yeah.
And without realizing it, that kind of melancholy kind of can take over sometimes.
Seeps in a little bit.
Yeah. And that's why you can walk in a kitchen when mom's got a turkey cooking or making Christmas cookies, and that smell, you're in a Star Trek Enterprise, light years, just taking you to a moment. And so those people, 2,000, 2,400 of them a night, bring that emotion into the theater to sit and watch a Christmas Carol. So you're tapping something that's right there ready to happen. All of us have a child inside of us. And generally it's that little child that got hurt somewhere along the line. Somebody made fun of you, somebody beat you. That was a moment of pain. And that child is locked here. We carry that hurt child around. And I think what we do, if we're smart, is we have to heal that hurt child. And you do it, I think, by, and I've seen this, I've done it in acting classes, and it's very powerful. You sit, kind of clear your head, think of a corridor with doors, and you are starting at one end of this corridor, and you walk into the first door, and there's a room, and you're asked to visualize this. The room is empty, but there's a chair in the corner. In that chair is you as a child, that hurt child, that person that got hurt somehow. And you see that child, you envision it, yeah, you got it, yeah. Then you walk over that child, and you kneel down, and you look at that child in the eyes, and you say, the grown-up you says to the child, I'm with you. I'm going to take your hand, and we're going to leave this room, and we're going to go down the hall, and we're going to go in every room. And you're not going to be by yourself. You're not going to be alone. I'm going to take you. And boy, you do that exercise. I've done it in acting classes. They're tears. I mean, people just lose it. But it's healing.
Right.
Because in each room are those other moments that you need to go and put behind you and settle the hash. But by the time you reach the end, boy, it's a big healing. And but I say that about Christmas because that child in us, healed or hurt, wants to come out and play at Christmas. And sometimes if you look at an adult on Christmas morning, you will see some sadness behind their eyes. They'll sit on the sofa and watch kids sit on the floor and open Christmas presents and wish they could be that child again. And my message to them is you can be. But the distance from the sofa seat to the floor is interminable unless you say, I'm going to come down. I'm going to sit on the floor. I'm going to be that child again. I'm going to let that child come out and play on Christmas morning. For years, my one dream was to have all the Christmas presents wrapped and under the tree and ready for Christmas morning so my wife and I could open a bottle of champagne in front of the fireplace and sit there and have that moment. And for some reason, something always happened, or we were tired, or I ended up having to spend 2 hours on a dadgum toy that wouldn't come together, you know. And it finally happened because I finally said, no, this moment is more important than that toy.
Right.
We will have that moment. And it was a blessing. It was a turnaround. And sometimes if you're sitting on that sofa and you feel that, let that kid out. Slide off that sofa and sit on the floor with your kids or your grandkids and start opening presents with them. It's a healing. And you can do it. And it's a very simple, you just have to commit. You have to commit to it. There's tons of stuff I've learned about the holidays, about Christmas time, having done the show now for 45 years and hearing other people's stories about coming to see the show has made a big difference too. So it's a present to ourselves. I tell the cast every year, again, I said, we're not a cast, we're a family.
Absolutely.
And we have to laugh about it. We have to cry about it. If we don't shed real tears, they're not going to shed real tears. It has to mean something to us. So, excuse me. That's what we try to do. And again, nobody gets paid for doing the show. I mean, everybody volunteers when you think about it. They're giving up a chunk of time, too. Halloween, Thanksgiving, and we roll now right up until a week or less before Christmas. So, and these are doctors, lawyers, ministers, school kids, college kids. They all come in and they give of their time. So I try to make it as fulfilling as I can for them because of that priceless gift. Time is our greatest gift.
It is.
And
it is.
When people come together and give you their greatest gift, you want to be your best. You want to make the experience one that they won't forget and one that will change their lives. So that's the goal. And you put it out there and you take a breath and you walk out on that stage. And I've said again, in the darkness of the wings of a theater before you walk out on that stage into the light, it's a sacred spot in that darkness. Things come together, spirits out there, your loved ones, whatever, they're there. And I've been in those wings with 103 temperature, with a vertebrae, going crazy on my neck and a lot of pain. And you're standing there going, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then man, you take that step into the light and something happens. Whoa, it's a healing. You forget yourself, which I think is the big thing. It's like sometimes we get in our own way. And
sometimes.
Yes.
All the time.
All the time. Well, a lot of times we do.
At least for me.
And if you can just shove that aside and start thinking about somebody else.
Yeah.
Make them important. We look at a lot of things every day. How many things do we honestly see? We listen to things every day.
What do
How
we
many
hear?
do we hear? When I had my open heart surgery in 2010, I came close to death. Well, they stop your heart. You're on the table. For all intents and purposes, your organs have shut down. And when I came out of that, my life was drastically different. Robin Williams even said so because he went through it. He said, "You'll cry at the drop of a hat." And I do. We go to the beach. My wife and I love to go to Sanibel in Florida because she loves seashells. And the beautiful shells there. Oh, my gosh. You get up at 7 o'clock and you're on the beach. It's my golf. I just go shelling. And we go to the hotel every time we go. We put the bags down, and we always like to walk out on the beach the first time, and we look at each other. And I'll say, "You ready?" And she'll go, "Yeah." And we take hands, walk out on the beach. I lose it.
Yep.
Because it's a celebration. It's like,
It's such a small thing, but it's
everything.
It's everything.
Those small things are everything. And we take
infinitesimal, infinite.
And we take them for granted. We take them for granted.
Yeah.
Never go to sleep angry. Always say, "I love you." My wife tells me, she said the other day, she said, "I must tell you I love you 8,000 times a day." I said, "Don't ever stop."
Yeah.
Don't ever stop.
Yeah.
Because we can't say it enough, and we can't show each other that we love each other enough. I was lucky in finding Ashley because she's blessed my life. And now at the age of 72, I have a 7-year-old son. So, boy, that's a whole different ballgame there. Yeah. But that happened again right after my heart surgery. We had tried to have children, and nothing materialized. And so we finally said, "Let go, let God. If it's going to happen, it'll happen."
And it did.
And a year after heart surgery,
Wow.
she says, "Hey, guess what?"
Wow.
So I said, "Yeah, you know what? That's like walking in to a car dealership and having your oil changed, and they rebuild the engine, So
That's cool.
yeah, it was nice.
Yeah, so real quick, before we start moving on to other... I thought you'd get a kick out of this.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
30.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Look at those names.
So, I mean, it's only 1/20th of the cast,
Yeah.
But some pretty big players in there.
yeah.
I think you've got to be on there somewhere. There you are.
Yeah.
Right here. Yeah.
That's so cool, man.
But we still got it.
Wow.
30th.
That was a nice poster, too.
Yeah. You said Robin Williams. If we can talk on that real quick. I've heard a rumor, and my parents have heard the rumor. A lot of people have heard the rumor for years that he made an onstage appearance. Is that true? With Christmas Carol.
And Robin Williams? No.
Okay.
No.
But I do know that there are celebrities. So the myth is debunked. Finally, we can put it at rest. But I know that there are other celebrities that have made.
Well, I'll tell you a great celebrity story. We had a guy in the cast. His name was Woody. I kept looking at Woody, and he was a dead ringer for Stevie Wonder. And I said, "Woody, come here." I said, "How about we put a dreadlock wig on you, dashiki shirt, and sunglasses, and we announce that Stevie Wonder's in the wings, and we bring you out." And I said, "We'll get a guy walk you out." And I said, you're going to do the Stevie Wonder thing. Because in those days, at the beginning of the show, Scrooge threw an old lady in the orchestra pit. She was a blind lady, beggar lady on the streets, and he would go over and shake her down. He'd take her cup and take the coins out and then say, I'm going to help you across the street. And it was generally a guy dressed up in drag. So I'd take the old lady to the edge of the stage and she would fall into the orchestra pit where we had a big mat and everything. Of course.
I think I remember that. I don't know if you were doing it back for some reason.
We cut it at some point, but so my whole idea was in the rock and roll number. I was going to, right in the middle of the number, I was going to look into the wings and go, oh my. And I would turn to the audience and go, ladies and gentlemen, you're not going to believe this. Got a major star in the wings. We're going to bring him out right now, ladies and gentlemen. So, and Woody would walk out. And then I said, and then what'll be funny is I will leave Stevie and get back into the rock and roll number, and we'll have Woody walk off the stage and fall. So Stevie Wonder will fall into the orchestra pit. Well, all the brothers turned to me and said, no. I said, what do you mean? He said, you can't throw Stevie Wonder in the pit. I said, I just threw an old lady in the pit. They said, no, but that's not Stevie Wonder, man. You cannot throw Stevie Wonder in the orchestra pit. So I said, okay, but can we bring him out? And they said, yeah, you can bring Stevie out, man, but you ain't throw him in the pit. So, I mean, every night in the rock and roll number, when I would introduce him and Woody would walk out, audience just went nuts, standing ovation. Oh, my God. And the next day at the theater, our poor secretary was inundated with phone calls. People would call up and go, hey, my wife and I have a bet, $50. Was that really Stevie Wonder last? And then the secretary would go, do you want it to be Stevie Wonder? Yes, please. Okay, it was Stevie Wonder. But yeah, so we had moments like that. I think one of the greatest celebrity appearances was a Hollywood actor, well known. Gene Nelson was his name. There were 3 dancers in Hollywood during the big musicals. Of course, Fred Astaire was number 1. Gene Kelly was number 2. Gene Nelson was number 3. He did some amazing movies. He's Will in the movie Oklahoma, and in our production, they put me in a casket when Scrooge meets the ghost of Christmas Future.
Yep.
They actually put Scrooge in a casket. Well, it was a breakaway casket, so somebody's feet were out on one end, and I was scrunched up in the other end when, like the magician, sawing the casket in two. So it was always some small person that could get in the casket and stick his feet out. And one night, it was so funny. They opened the lid, and they were putting me in, and I looked in the foot, and it was Gene Nelson sticking his feet out for my feet. And I was going, I got Gene Nelson's feet, man. This is great. And I think the one other wonderful night was the curtain when I went out for the rock and roll number. A drop came up, and all of the Embers were out there on the stage. And I had grown up listening to the Embers,
right?
Beach music. Oh my gosh! And they came out and started to jam. And so I said, "Okay, that's it, man. This is wonderful. The Embers." So I packed my bags, Mom. I'm singing with the Embers. It was great. But yeah, a lot of stories like that. And I guess somebody said, you need to write a book about the adventures putting Christmas Carol together. We took it to France twice. We took it to England, and we played in a theater where they had actually booed Charlie Chaplin off the stage. And it was a tough audience. I was told after the fact. They didn't tell me before I went on, but it was the equivalent of opening in Boston, which is always a tough house.
Right.
But they went nuts for it. They loved it. When we went to France, we had the narrator of the show as the lamplighter, and so we cast somebody that year who could speak fluent French. And so he would come and set up the scene. We'd come out and speak in English. Occasionally, if we knew a French phrase or a word, we could throw it in. Mm-hmm. Of course, the French language is so beautiful. Scrooge could stand over Tiny Tim and go, "L'avion part à minuit." That means the plane leaves at midnight. But who cares? It sounds so wonderful in French. Just throw it in. The other thing that unnerved us the first night was when the show was over, they didn't applaud. They'd go. They stomped their feet. We thought they were rushing the stage,
Wow.
But yeah, it was really amazing. And afterwards, we would go out and meet with the audience and would ask, if they understood the show. And they said, every word, we got it. It was beautiful. My French story too. I'll tell you this too. It's kind of funny. When a Christmas Future says, he opens the book and says date of death, and Scrooge says whose death, and he says yours. Well, I figured I'm in France. They've canonized Jerry Lewis practically. They love Jerry Lewis. So I'll do Jerry Lewis, lady, you know how know. Well, you. And they'll just go nuts. Well, I got out on a stage, and whose death? Yours. Well, I don't know. Crickets.
Really?
No, nothing.
Jeez.
And I go, maybe they didn't hear it. Lady, and I do it again, and nothing. I went, oh my gosh. And I got off stage, and I went up to our cultural liaison person from Compiègne, and I said, qu'est-ce que c'est, Jerry Lewis? I thought everybody, and she said, David, we love Jerry Lewis, but you have to understand, he's dubbed. We've never heard his real voice.
Oh my God!
So I'm walking around thinking, well, somewhere over in France, I think Jerry Lewis sounds like Pepe Le Pew, hello, lady. So
strange.
Yeah, but
wow,
wonderful, wonderful people, and that was another great lesson that the emotions that we share in the theater on stage are universal. People laugh at the same thing all over the world. And if theater can deal in those basic emotions, you got it made. You know, music transcends language. Theater, the arts can do that. They break down barriers, race, color, creed, religion, nationality, and you can approach people, I think, so much easily and in many ways more effectively. If we learn one thing in our lives, it's how to communicate better, how to communicate in a more meaningful way, how to use words. It's so important, so important. If we knew how to do that better, I think so many problems in the world would disappear.
The aortic aneurysm. Can you walk me through some of the emotions that were going on at that point?
At what point?
Just the heart attack.
Oh. Well,
because this is obviously enriched an already well-drawn reservoir of your experiences in life, but I'm sure it had to have changed dramatically certain perspectives.
Absolutely. And when I did some research on it, it's amazing how many people have experienced the same kind of surgery. My only symptoms were a shortness of breath when I would lie down in bed at night. So there was no attack, there was no... And I would find myself kind of fighting, to get a breath. And I have to get a physical every year for A Christmas Carol. And it turns out that there's a doctor in the cast who's also on our board of directors who always checks me out. And so he was listening with his stethoscope, and he kept listening, and he didn't smile, and I'm looking at his face, and he looked up and he said, I see you got a heart murmur. And he said, I didn't hear this last year. He said, you might want to get this checked out. So I said, thank you, I will. I went after rehearsal that night to my in-laws for dinner, and I said, Bob, man, Dr. Bob found a heart murmur tonight. And my father-in-law said, well, listen, I've got a good friend who's a really fine heart specialist. With your permission, I'll give him a call and see if he can check you out. And I said, sure, because I'm thinking if he's a heart specialist, he's booked. If he's good, he's booked. So I'll go do Christmas Carol, and then after the first of the year, I'll come in and get this thing checked out. So my father-in-law makes the call, comes back out and says, he'll see you in the morning at 8 o'clock. And I went,
Jeez.
Whoa. I just had a feeling right then that my goose was cooked. So I went in the next morning, and my wife and I are sitting on the sofa in the waiting room, and he came up behind me, the doctor, and he touched me on the shoulder and kind of stroked my shoulder. And right away I loved him because he's a toucher. and that's healing. The physical touch is, and because in America, we're not touchers. We get on an elevator with people and it's like, no. And doctors, they have to have that healing touch. And I could tell just the way he was comfortable with it. And he said, I'm sorry to meet you under these circumstances, but come on back and let's do an ultrasound and we'll see what's happening. So I said, okay. See, I went, laid on the bed. He ran the thing. He's looking at the screen, and he calls, and the second doctor walks in, and I go, oh, this is not good. And they're looking at the monitor, and they start speaking.
Then we got all the interns, coming in the room.
Yeah, this is...
I've been there before, so it's,
And they start speaking real softly, and they're looking at the monitor, and it kind of goes, oh.
It's like golf commentary.
And I was ready for somebody to go, good God! So thankfully that didn't happen, but...
Right.
They finished up, and he said, get your shirt on and come across the hall, and we'll talk. So when I walked across the hall, walked in the room, my wife sitting at the table, and I sat down, and she reached over and took my hand. I went, oh, this is not good. So he looked at me, and he said, do you have an understudy for Scrooge? And I said, well, yes, my oldest son, Ira. And he said, he's going on this year. And I said, really? And he said, David, it's not good. We have to get you in the OR right away. And I went, well, yes, sir. I went home. I called Ira up. I said, can you come by the house? He walked in, and I said, hi, Mr. Scrooge. And color just...
He already...
Yeah, I knew. I mean, it was like... And he said, are you serious? And I said, I'm as serious as a heart attack. You're going to do it this year. So I went to the theater that night, and I made the announcement to the cast. I was diagnosed on Tuesday. I was in the OR by Thursday. That's how quickly they scheduled it.
So there was no heart attack then?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
It was a
For some reason I thought there was, but this was, what, a decade ago, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was very lucky, because John Ritter died of the same thing. It's a silent killer.
Well, 8 out of 10 was the statistic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. By all rights, I should be in an urn on my mantelpiece. I should be a bunch of ashes in an urn. When they got in, they found a lot of problems. And basically, I have a new valve in my heart. It's pig's valve. So I can root up truffles with the best of them. Barbecue in our house is a religious experience. But again, I asked them before they let me out of the hospital, and I was only there for about 6 days. And it's amazing what they do now, because you're sitting there going, oh, they stop your heart, and they recycle the blood through a machine that's then pumped back in. But you are
clinically dead.
Yeah, and your entire system's shut down. And when you wake up after 7 hours of that kind of surgery, every system has to start up again. So, yeah. And I couldn't. I remember I couldn't sleep. I was in no pain. Remarkably,
post op.
Yeah, they break your rib cage to open your chest up, and after the surgery, that was a wild thing. One of the guys who was on the surgical teams, they all at one point stopped by my room, but this one guy came in, and in the course of conversation, he said, "Would you like to see pictures of your heart?" And I went, "Shut up! You got pictures of my heart." How did you get those? He said, "I got a cell phone." He said, "The doctor did a Cadillac version on you." He said, he said, "We were all just watching this surgery." And he said, I took pictures. So I said, "Well, definitely I want them." And that was an experience to sit there and to see your chest open and your heart just sitting there. I had my Valentine's all made, for Valentine's Day. But oh my gosh, it is life altering. It life altering, and I remember being out on a lawn in a public place with my nieces and nephews and my young son, and they were all running and playing. It was a summer afternoon, beautiful dusk. And I'm sitting there with the kids, and there's a guy sitting over on a bench kind of watching me, and I'm aware of him. And he said, like that, and I walked over, and he said, "You're Ira David Wood." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I was your anesthetist during your surgery."
Jeez.
And he said, it's really nice to see you out here enjoying life.
Yeah.
And I lost it. I gave him a hug. It's like, because you just,
Yeah.
It's everything is so profound after something like that. Colors are richer. Food tastes incredibly amazing. Sight, sound, your senses are alive. Because by all rights, you shouldn't be here enjoying your physical presence in the earth.
Right.
Why the good Lord allowed that to happen, I don't know. But I've said I want to take advantage of every moment of life that I have left to make a difference, because evidently my job here wasn't done. I've still got some stuff
apparently
to do.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk about family real quick and the balance between such a prolific career and how that's worked over the years, and just any struggles along the way?
Well, it's a juggling act. My first marriage ended in divorce. Because it was tough. My first wife was an actress, and we had Evan, my daughter Evan, and Ira, who's now my oldest son. We knew at an early age that both were talented in the theater. As it turned out, Evan got the lucky break by being cast by Timothy Hutton in a movie called Digging to China with Kevin Bacon that was filmed in the western part of the state, after which she and her mother went to the West Coast. And Evan, of course, is doing remarkably well now. She just got a law passed. She's been crusading for this domestic abuse law, and they got it passed, and she's studying law now because she said, "Dad, I think this is really important." She's doing her third season of Westworld, but
Yep.
I have to say at the same time, when people look at Evan and they go, my gosh, how lucky, and I said, yeah, but she gave up a lot of her childhood.
Absolutely.
She came from a broken home.
I read somewhere that she graduated homeschooled by 15, high school.
We took both of our kids out of school, again, because of that thing that I mentioned earlier. They were being abused by their peers. My son Ira couldn't walk from one class to another without being slammed up against a locker.
Oh, my God.
And he came home one day. I was sitting on the porch reading a script, learning lines, and he came and crawled up on the front porch swing with me, put his head on my shoulder and started to cry. And I said, "Buddy, what is it? What's wrong?" And he said, "Why do they hate me so much?" And I just thought, oh, my gosh, it's the same thing nobody's learned since I was little. And I said, people fear what they don't understand. These guys, who are bullying you, don't understand theater. They don't understand what it is you do. They understand football and baseball and basketball.
It's so hard for me to believe. Of course it happened. It's just, but because I was on set with him for over a year with the Believers, and it was just, what a beautiful person. Like, he and I got along so well. He became one of my best friends, and still is, even though it's tough to stay in touch at times, but one of the funniest people I've ever met in my entire, what a beautiful personality.
Well, that sense of humor, I think, saved him. But, there's a saying, show me a clown, I'll show you a tragedy.
Yeah.
Because most of our funny people come from a hurt, because they understand the priceless value of laughter and happiness. So they made it. Both of them made it, but it was tough, and it is tough for young people still. But you gotta persevere. You gotta hang in there. It doesn't last forever. I remember after Ira graduated, we went to a movie one night together, and as we pulled into the parking lot, he looked over, and there was a group of guys standing around a car, and he said, "Dad, they're the bullies. That's the bullies. They used to pick on me at school." So Dad's getting out of the car like, okay, I'm ready to take on the crowd if it happens. And they saw Ira get out of the car, and they went, "Ira!" And they came over and slammed him on the back and gave him hugs, and it was like, that was a healing for him. He was just in a daze when we walked in. He said, "I never knew they liked me or remembered me." And I said, "See, you never know when that moment comes back that kind of heals that hurt child." But that made a big difference to him. And I think that's a common thread. You mentioned The Believers, the movie that we all worked on together. And when that group of people got together and started talking about their experiences, the commonalities were there, and everybody kind of went through that same baptism by fire to get where you are. And because it's not easy. I mean, you didn't just pick up a guitar and said, "Hey, I'm going," and it just happened. This takes work. It takes planning. You have to be your own advocate sometimes. You have to stand up against people sometimes, and
Even yourself.
yes. Oh well, yourself.
Every
most
day.
of all, you have to do that with yourself.
This is just a fascinating. I'm just letting the words roll. Usually I try to interject a lot more often, but I'm letting it roll here because this is just, and you're hitting bullet points, so I'm happy as a lark.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
I'll ask you this. You said the word commitment earlier, and I have a bullet point with the word commitment as an actor. Elaborate on that a little bit if you would, because you are a huge influence for me, obviously, over the years. But one of the big things that I come back to is just how committed you are when you're in character.
Oh, you have to be. Without commitment, you're kind of wandering.
Right.
And as I said, I was lucky enough to find theater in my life when I was 14. So I had a commitment to this calling since I was 14. When you're younger, you're like an octopus. You can go out in 8 different directions. You're just grabbing and experiencing and
have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then as you get older, God divides. It's a nice thing. You become a little more focused. You've learned enough, to kind of settle back on your heels and narrow down these things that you want to accomplish. Maturity, I don't know. I think it's just a life cycle. It's what we do. We're committed to an open field when we begin, and then I think our aim becomes surer. You get older, you realize, well, when I opened Christmas Carol, I was 27. Now the numbers are reversed. I'm 72. So I can't run around the stage like a 20-year-old. Scrooge has developed, and I
Rightfully so.
well, it's less makeup, pretty soon I'll just walk in and cut it on, but you grow into it. You realize there are things that you want to accomplish, and sometimes you have to say, look, I'm going to put this in the background, and I need to go for this. I really want to do a good job here. And that's, I think, if age teaches you anything, it teaches you that, to be a little more discerning, because you're closer to the end than the beginning. And when you get to that point in your life, it begins to sort things through on its own. I mean, there are some decisions you don't have to make anymore because you feel that cold breath of mortality on your neck now and then. You don't now because you're a babe. You know?
I've had my moments with some illness when I was a teenager, and it totally changed me. Totally. And the crazy thing is now when I look back, my art would have never been where I never would have even reached where I am now as far as.
So in a way, you were lucky. It's like,
and that's how I have. That's
you've got to look at it.
You
that
have
way.
to look at it that way.
You have to.
Yes.
It's like when you heat metal in a forge because you're going to shape it into something. That's a lot of heat and a lot of pounding. But a shapeless, formless piece of iron can turn into something incredible. And I think that's what happens to us sometimes. We have to go into that forge, the heat, the intensity of that moment, and then we're slammed around and beaten into shape. Because sometimes we're hard-headed, and it takes a pretty good blow.
Or a good 100.
Yeah, to get your attention. And your body will do that. Your body is the first barometer. It'll just say, nope, you can't do that anymore. And we've all done it. You wake up with that hangover, and you go, never again.
Do you find that a lot of people are not as self-aware as perhaps you or the artist sitting next to you?
I think that's a danger today because we have more things that pull us from ourselves. We think social media is connecting us to people, and in a way it is, and yet it's still an electronic thing. It's not what we're doing right now is sitting and talking. So I think we have to be careful about the distractions, and there are a great many today. So we have to be discerning,
Yes.
and that's tough. It's tough. Yeah, your body is your best barometer because it's going to be the first thing to tell you it's a governor. It says, no, you can't do this. You don't want to do this. One of the things I've learned about age is you become a tripod. It's interesting. When you're young, your balance is taken for granted. When you're older, you know what what the greatest fear of an old person is? Falling. And so you'll find people, there's one hand on something at all times, whether it's a walking cane, it's the edge of the bed, it's a chair, they become tripods. And it's very interesting because I think part of what you do in life is observe, especially in theater.
Some more than others.
Yes.
Some people are not awake.
No. But in theater, you have to be because you want to mirror life. You want to put it back on the stage. Yeah. So that's been an interesting thing because I certainly do it now. I find myself, kind of bracing, and it's just something that happens and it creeps up on you little by little. I like that saying, you turn 70 if you don't have an ailment. Wait a minute, one will be assigned to you. Because my mom used to say it so often in her senior years. She said, old age ain't for sissies, and it's true. You enter another stage in your life, it's all about learning. You can't stop learning. You have to have an insatiable appetite to learn. I think, right up until you close your eyes for the last time, you want to discover, you want to, why am I here? What is life? Is there life after? I want to know the answers. And I think you have to have that insatiable appetite for knowledge. And it keeps you young, it keeps you alive, it keeps you functioning.
Well, nice segue for the recent work, which we have on the table there.
Yes.
Can we give the viewers a little
This, yes.
visual.
But it's the
Russian Galatea.
Yeah. This was a stage play that I wrote years ago. Assassinations have fascinated me. I
Tell me how you really feel.
Well, I lived through Kennedy's assassination, and I think that was such a watershed event.
Still a lot of unknowns.
Oh, yeah.
Still a lot of unknowns about that.
People have asked me, why did you get interested in that? Because I've researched the Kennedy assassination for over 35 years now, have written a chronology on the assassination, a portion of which has been published. A guy in England transcribed it and got it all down. And people said, well, why did you get interested? And I said, I think it was because when my dad died when I was 12, there was nothing I could do but accept that. I couldn't bring him back. When Kennedy was shot down in Dallas, I thought there was something I could do, not to bring him back, but to illuminate perhaps why he died. I believe that it was a conspiracy. I think that the message that was delivered in the way it was delivered, he shot on a public street at high noon with witnesses. There are 50 different ways you can kill somebody. I mean, poison them. You could get in the White House. You could do it that way.
Right.
These people wanted him shot down on a street in Dallas. That was a message that went out.
Yeah.
And a young generation got that message and dropped out of politics. So that fascinated me. My first published play was a play called Finale about John Wilkes Booth and his brother Edwin Booth, Junius Booth, who was their father. It was an amazing family of actors, and he was an assassin of a president of the United States. So that captivated me, and it happens like you get an idea to write a song, something will trigger it. For some reason, and I love history.
I was going to say, what a historian. As I talked to you and as I did my research yesterday, very few people I've come across that are as well-versed in history.
History teaches us so much. There was a story that I ran across just by accident. Edwin Booth, who was the older brother of John Wilkes Booth, after John assassinated Lincoln, Secretary of War Stanton confiscated a trunk that belonged to the family, in which there were prompt books and some costumes, supposedly. Stanton had this trunk locked away for 7 years. Edwin Booth eventually begged the trunk back and got the trunk. He had a theater in New York then, the Booth Theater, had the trunk delivered to the theater and had himself locked in the basement of the theater one morning at 2 a.m., and he opened the trunk and took the contents out. I'm sure he, had memories connected with each one. He burned them all in the furnace of the theater, took an axe and chopped the trunk up and burned it as well. Well, when I read that, I said, that's a play. So I sat down and wrote Finale during one of my trips to California, as a matter of fact. And it takes place in the basement of the Booth Theater, and it's surrounded. He is surrounded by the ghosts of his past. When he walks down and he gets ready to touch the trunk, he can't bring himself to do it, and suddenly John Wilkes steps out of the shadows and starts to talk. And the ghosts of his past, even Lincoln, comes back.
Wow.
In the basement of this theater, so you have theater props and shadows and things. So it went over very well.
So it's strange how the story also has a underground room.
Yep. Yes. Same thing. Same thing in Galatea. I was vacationing. I was getting ready to take a vacation to Hawaii years ago. And I took a beach book with me, something I could just sit out on the beach and read. We went to Kauai, which was gorgeous, and there were no televisions, there were no radios in the place we stayed. It was just beautiful. And I read this book about the imperial family, Tsar Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra, their 4 daughters, and the heir apparent to the throne, Alexei. And, of course, the family supposedly murdered in the basement of the Ipatiev house in Siberia, and by the Bolsheviks, who then tried to cover up this crime.
And that was Lenin in 1918, right?
Yeah.
At least
Yes.
that was how it was propagated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Before the Civil War.
so I'm sitting there reading this book, and I'm thinking to myself, the playwright, I guess, the writer is kind of kicking in, and I'm thinking, well, the Bolsheviks tried to obliterate all the evidence of the bullets in the wall in this basement room, and how do we know what happened?
Right.
And I thought to myself, gosh, that would be a play, that would be a story if a private investigator was assigned like a Columbo, to go, hey.
I got some Columbo and Twin Peaks hints when I was looking at this. I was thinking, this is similar to, I don't know if you're familiar with that David Lynch series.
Yes,
but
of course.
Brilliant. And Laura Palmer, who was she? You never see her. It's all Dale Cooper.
Yeah.
And it's not that he falls in love with her, because he doesn't, but it's there's that twist.
Yeah.
And even the audience becomes very, very in tune to her and encapsulated,
Well, it captivated me, this story, when I got to the end of the book. It was the book was, by the way, Nicholas and Alexandra by Robert Massey, and Massey became interested in the subject. Yeah. Because his son was a hemophiliac, just like the Tsarevich, Alexei. Anyway, when I got to the end of this book, I discovered that an investigator was indeed assigned to find out. And his name was Nicholas Sokolov. Mm-hmm. He had only one eye. He had lost one eye in a hunting accident, and he had a glass eye, but he had a photographic memory. And I thought, that's a character. As I did more research on it, I discovered all of these historical figures who were part of this story. And I said, well, it's a play. It begs to be written. So I wrote the play called Galatea. It was simply called Galatea. We premiered it here in Raleigh. We did 2 productions of it. And there is a revelation, there's a reveal in the play that I thought the audience is going to figure this out. They're going to see this car coming down the highway with the headlights on and the horn blaring and the windshield wipers going. And opening night, I was really curious to see if they were going to figure it out, because they become detectives. The audience is, And during the big reveal, there were audible gasps. So I said, oh, they didn't get it. They didn't see it. So I thought, that's great. And a few years later, it just occurred to me that writing a novel might be fun. Again, after the heart surgery, I thought to myself, you're not going to be able to run around the stage as Scrooge forever, and you want to find some outlet for this, whatever this creative urge is. So I said, well, let's try writing. And the nice thing was I could take this play that I had blocked, so I knew all the movement in the play, and I could free it from the stage set and take it to places in Siberia, in Russia, move the location around, bring people in that I couldn't in the play, and it was a fascinating experience. I did more research, and I started writing the book. And the beautiful thing was I had all the dialogue, because that was in the play. So all I had to do was transport the dialogue into the novel form and then write out the action. So it came together in spurts, because I would be working on this production or that production, so I'd shelve it for a while. So it took a few years to finish it. And somebody said, what was the hardest part of it, the research? And I said, no, the research was so much fun. It was really interesting. I said, in the first chapter, Sokolov meets the head of the White Army in Russia, and they drink vodka. And I said, the hardest part was remembering how much vodka had been swilled out of a glass, because I had to go back sometimes, because I would either say, Admiral Kolchak finished his glass of vodka and set it down, and then a little while later I'd catch myself going, he picks up the glass, there's still vodka in it. So I had to go back and be meticulous about how much vodka was in these two glasses, because in Russia, they drink vodka. Oh, my God. They toast
Straight,
everything.
just
everything.
straight.
Yeah. We would have had finished 2 bottles by now if we were in Russia.
I'd be on the floor.
Yes, we would be probably just singing Russian songs at this point.
It's funny you bring up research, because I thought the New York Times article that you stumbled across was interesting. That came out in December of 1918 with that possible conspiracy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a lot of conspiracies are surrounding the imperial family, the most famous being whether or not Anastasia survived. And of course, there was the stage play Anastasia. Disney's done an animated version. There was the movie with Ingrid Bergman, Yul Brynner, Helen Hayes, Anastasia, based on the life of Anna Anderson, who lived in Virginia and who claimed to be the daughter of the Tsar. Later, it was supposedly proved by DNA evidence that she wasn't. Then remains were found in Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union. This discovery was made public, and the bones supposedly were identified through DNA tests. But there's a discrepancy between the two groups who examined the bones. The Russian Orthodox Church never said officially these were the Romanovs, the remains of the Romanovs. They only call them holy martyrs. So the remains of all of the family, except for 2, are in the St. Peter and Paul Cathedral. There's a burial vault that they were buried there. But they've not put 2 bodies in there because, again,
allegedly they were burned right after the incident.
Yes,
Okay.
and which again added a bit of mystery to the whole situation, because the head of the execution squad, his name was Jacob Yurovsky. Why would he bury 5 and burn 2? You know, he said later it was to throw people off the scent if they discovered the pit where these bodies were buried. But the thing is, there are discoveries made every day about this. And since the book has come out, I've been aware of some more discoveries. Russia, Vladimir Putin, they want this story to go away. It's a black eye in the history of Russia. So one wonders if the remains were manufactured in order to put this all to rest. There were 17 members of the royal family who were also executed during the same period of time. So bones of Romanovs would be fairly easy to come by.
Right.
So anyway, I had all of this as a writer to work with, and I wanted it to be historical fiction. But Sokolov also forms this relationship with the photograph of Anastasia, which he keeps on his desk, and he feels that she's alive. And after a while, this becomes an obsession to him to prove that she did survive. And again, I think it was that theme that I latched onto, where I wanted to think and believe that truth and beauty survive. And I dedicated it to my kids and my grandchild, because that was my message: truth and beauty survive. you're going to grow up in a world that's pretty dysfunctional, and God bless you. What the next generation is going to face with all kinds of things going on in the world.
Yeah.
Gosh, I wish him the best.
Thanks.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we did our best, man. We had Woodstock, and we had some great music. We had some good times. We thought we could change the world with love. That was the big thing in the 60s, the love generation, placing flowers in the barrels of the National Guard. We believed it. We believed that love could change. I still believe it. I think truth and beauty
I still do too.
Survive, and we have to believe that. I think we have.
It's like Martin Luther King. Love is the only way to transform an enemy into a friend.
Yeah,
it's
see,
very profound.
Living during that time where Dr. King, John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Malcolm X, these people who spoke out and were incredible leaders were shot down. We lost so many, our generation. Boy, it affects you, and maybe that's why, you want to solve it. You want to find out what happened. So you're healing that hurt child. I mean, these children were murdered in the basement. If you believe that story,
right?
What a horrid,
heinous. I mean, it's just like
way to go. Yeah. And so that was the attempt. I told my wife too when I was writing. I said maybe there'll be a couple of people in the world who will be interested in the subject of the Tsar of Russia in 1918. But I've been amazed at the number of people who are interested in the
topic. It's just such an interest. Like I sent you on the Facebook Messenger yesterday, doing the research. It's like a history lesson.
It's a rabbit hole. It's a rabbit hole.
It's a real rabbit hole.
Yeah, you fall down it, and then you got, oh man, I'm going to get this book. I'm going to get that book, which is what I did, starting with the Kennedy assassination. Now I've got a library of books and videos.
Library.
Yeah, and the same thing with the Tsar of Russia. With John Wilkes Booth. I mean, there's a book that I carry with me whenever I travel. It's called The Glory and the Dream by William Manchester, and it's a brief history of the United States during a certain time period. It doesn't go all the way back, and I carry it everywhere with me. Walter Cronkite said, history is the story of people's lives. Joe DiMaggio, Marilyn Monroe, Richard Nixon, Dwight Eisenhower. When you start peeling away the layers of the onion and learning about history and about the people who made history, who become part of our history, Neil Armstrong landing on the moon and never dreaming about it. He said, the thing that worries me, I never dream about the moon. And I thought, wow.
Yeah,
that would just stay with me. I think I would dream about that every night, being one of only 12 people, a dozen people who walked on the moon. So I wrote a play called Dark Glass, based on the Bible verse. We when we're child. Now that I'm a child, I put away childish things.
Paul, right?
Yes, yeah. You're looking through the glass darkly and then face to face. And I decided I would write a play about 3 astronauts who went to the moon and they come back and now they're middle-aged, and one of them has kind of a mental breakdown and he's starting to doubt the fact that they actually went to the moon. So it's a sci-fi thing, kind of.
Yeah.
But you find that your interest in a certain thing, subject, whatever, tends to come in, ruminate for a bit, and then come out as a play, as a song, as a dance, as a painting. But I think that's what the creative process is all about: is seeing something, filtering it through whatever you have that makes you special. If it was Picasso, you translate it into Picasso painting. Salvador Dali would do it a different way. Hemingway wrote with those clipped sentences, and F. Scott Fitzgerald had these long sentences that smelled like magnolia trees. I mean, the South just permeates that stuff. But when you learn about this thing, it's amazing. And for me, one thing that I learned very early on, and as a musician, you may find it interesting, but whenever I take a book, a play, and I start to break it down, I look at it like sheet music. It's almost like this is a symphony. There's a love theme. There's a theme for the villain. There's the funny theme. And one theme will have a certain rhythm. The next theme will have a different rhythm.
Cadence is everything.
Yeah. And if you think about that, think of Jaws. 2 notes. Ba-dum. Everything.
It's a half step.
2 notes.
Half step.
2 notes. So
yep. Says everything.
What you learn is if I'm doing a character in a play, I've got a certain rhythm. Maybe I'm a trumpet. Somebody I'm playing opposite is a flute. And their rhythm is a little different too. And that's what you want. You want opposing rhythms because you can only do short bursts of everybody in unison.
Without monotony, perhaps.
Yeah, and because if the whole play is like that, you're bored. But when you have the different rhythms, boy, it becomes interesting. And you got harmony, you've got dissonance, you've got all of that thing that comes together, and it forms a symphony. So, you know, when you look at the whole thing, it's quite wonderful. And I don't know, it's helped me. I know different people approach it in different ways, but that's one of the ways that's always worked for me. I was raised on movies, so in all of my plays, there's a lot of incidental music. I love to put music underneath things. That was one of the big things I did in the Lost Colony outdoor drama. I've gone back to direct that. Next summer will be my 8th year down there. But one of the things, first thing I did was get a very talented guy, McCrae Hardy. And I said, McCrae, I want you to come and be the musical director. McCrae's like you. He's very creative. He's got the computerized software and things, so he can actually create a symphonic sound on his computer, which is just blows me away. Yeah. But I told him, I said, I want a love theme. I want the comic to have a theme. I want the villain to have a theme. And so we've layered the show now with this underscoring music, which everybody says, oh my goodness, we should have done this, years ago, because Paul Green wrote what he said is a symphonic drama. I think all dramas are symphonic dramas, dance, music, and drama, telling a story. So music is such a common language, common denominator, that I love to use it in everything I do. When I write, I have music on. It's just,
Oh, it got me through college. It got me through business
Well, it's
school.
going to get you through life, buddy. You've still got so much ahead of you, and I'm excited to see where you go with it. You're a very talented young man. You were when I first met you, and you were a little in A Christmas Carol, and I got to say, you've just matured. You've grown into this man. Very talented. You've got a direction. You've got a commitment, and keep it up. Keep it up, because you're going to touch hearts and change lives, and I'm going to be interested to see all of that happen.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the funny things, not to totally just digress as we reset here, but one of the things that I find very funny online when I was conducting my research yesterday, and they kept showing up. It was like Mix 101.5, WRAL, the dramatic reading. So I've took the liberty, as you have in front of you. We have a couple here, but some of these you've done already. I'm giving you a new one. It came out in 2019, this year. Old Town Road. Can we... Okay.
I will channel the old actor. This started out when people just said, channel an actor and read the lyrics of popular songs. So I always liked to go for Peter O'Toole because he was wonderful and always had a cigarette and a
I'm gonna drink first before you start
martini.
this,
Okay.
so I don't choke and die before my time.
I would channel the old actor. Yeah, I'm gonna take my horse to the old town road. I'm gonna ride till I can't no more. I'm gonna take my horse to the old town road. I'm gonna ride till I can't no more. I got the horses in the back. Horse tack is attached. Hat is matte black. Got the boots that's black to match. Riding on a horse. Ha ha! You can whip your Porsche. I've been in the valley. You ain't been up off that porch. No, can't nobody tell me nothing. You can't tell me nothing. You can't tell me nothing. You can't tell me nothing. Riding on a tractor, lean all in my bladder, cheated on my baby, you can go and ask her. My life is a movie, bull riding and boobies, cowboy hat from Gucci, Wrangler on my booty. Can nobody tell me nothing? You can't tell me nothing. Can nobody tell me nothing? You can't tell me nothing.
Scene.
The old actor. Speaking of acting, I have to say, by the way,
Oh God.
you and the Believers, you got a natural way. Camera
appreciate
loves
that.
you, and you really came out of that lovely. It was a beautiful job.
Well, I appreciate it. They're still, believe it or not, doing post. So I'm excited to see what happens.
This is a mini series, this thing in post. It's been going on years. But yes, I am too. I think with a little editing, this is going to be, I
Yeah.
think it's still a good, it's
Well,
good.
you know how it is with projects. I mean, I was running music production on it and wrote a number of songs and
Yeah.
tracked and worked on it. And it's just, I'm just excited to see the final product.
Yeah.
Because there's so much talent
Isn't it?
in the project.
Yeah, that was.
You know?
That was. And again, to me, it's another lesson in why the arts survive. We had a lot of movie companies pulled out of North Carolina, the big ones. And when that happened, these independents came in and just filled up the void. There were a lot of independent movies being made in North Carolina, and good stuff too. And you're right, they're pulling some incredible talent together, and it's a great training ground for people. So I think we're going to see some good.
I think we're gonna see a final cut very soon. That's out.
It'd be great.
Yeah. You strike another bullet point as we get towards the end of this mini-series in itself, as you were alluding to when I was doing my faith walk around, pressing a bunch of record buttons. Future. Twofold. Yourself personally, and also the future of art in general.
I'm hopeful about the future. We have to be.
Yeah.
I think we have to take better care of the earth. That's our home. And we're experiencing a lot of change. There's a lot of discussion about where it's coming from. But the fact is, change is happening. Change always will happen. I think we've got to go back to the basics. We've forgotten a lot of things about how to live on the earth, how to, again, as my vocational agriculture teacher taught me, put something back, nurture the soil,
Yep.
take care of the water that we drink, the air we breathe, because without that, there's nothing. There's no art. There's no life. There's just nothing. So what do I see in the future? I was thinking the other day, can you imagine what it will be like one day when we can see ballet dancers performing on the moon with less gravity than there is on the Earth.
Man,
can you imagine what they're going to be able to
the brilliance of your
accomplish?
mind just like escalate. No, I'm just like saying, like I never would have thought of that. Never would have thought of that.
It just hit me the other day. That will be something to see when they can put on, because I'm sure we will eventually venture out into the universe. We have to. This Earth won't last forever, and that is captivating. I believe there's life out there. I think that's going to turn civilization around, hopefully, when we find intelligent life, peaceful life.
That's a whole other miniseries right there, man.
I've started work. On a new novel.
That's like that's a meteor hole. That's not a rabbit hole. That's like
that is big time.
No pun intended.
My new novel is about the second coming. And
so you're working on it?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Okay.
He's a clone. We've identified the DNA in the Shroud of Turin.
This is going to be interesting. This is going to be interesting.
Buried in the shroud. When they can isolate the DNA in two historic relics and match the DNA, they clone the man buried in the Shroud of Turin. We see him 13 years old in the novel. That's where we see him. In the Bible, we lose Jesus when he's 12, and then he comes back in his 30s. So there's a whole section of the life of Christ we've lost in the Bible. So I said, okay, what if we cloned him? What if we can bring him back? The Bible tells us that he's coming again, so who says he can't be a clone? So that kicked off everything in my brain. I was in New York with my wife, and we always go to St. Bart's Cathedral and sit outside. They have a restaurant next to the church in New York, and it's a wonderful people-watching place. And we sit outside and we eat. The sangria that they serve is amazing. And one day I said, I'm going in the church. I got to see what inside of St. Bart's is like. So I walked in, and of course, there are the statues of Christ and all of that. And I just thought in my mind, what would he say if he could come back and see what we've done, see all of this? And how would we treat him? Would we treat him the same way? Would we kill him again because he didn't look like we thought he looked? He hung out with the lower class people.
Right.
So
turn religion on its head.
Yeah, exactly.
Thankfully.
Yes.
Thankfully.
And I think perhaps that needs to happen again. I think
absolutely
there are revolutions in our history that move us forward, just like there are epochs in the history of man where messengers have come to earth. Buddha, Christ, Confucius, some writers, some artists, they're all messengers, and they bring a message that moves us forward in the scale of human existence. The message is generally about love.
Right.
And we can't hear that enough. We're living in dark times right now. We're very polarized as a nation. And we tend to, as I said, we tend to point out the differences between peoples, between nations. We need to get over that. We need to look at people as members of a family on this earth that grows smaller every day, to quote Christmas Present in A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
We are one family. We have to begin to treat each other like that, take better care of our home. Once we do that, I think the renaissance that we're talking about, that we want to see happen, will happen. I think we go through 10-year cycles where funding for the arts kind of dries up, and then we hit another 10-year cycle where the support is there, the interest is there. There tends, for some reason, to be a rebirth, a resurgence, and it goes like that throughout history. We've had renaissances have started in small villages, say in Italy. There's no reason a renaissance couldn't begin here in the Triangle area. When I first came here.
I think you've done it.
Well,
To me,
I've been a part of it, but it's not one person. It's a group of people that suddenly have to go, hey, it's like Judy and Mickey. We got a barn. Let's put on a play. Let's do some stuff. So,
well, it's a sign of a true leader.
Yes. Well,
you're gonna celebrate all the people that are right there with you, shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, because you see the people that are like you. Again, the commonalities.
Yeah.
And you go, wow, you got music, you got this, you got that. Let's come together and let's do something incredible. I think that will happen. We'll see more of that. When I first came to Raleigh, like I was saying, I think there were 5 or 6 theaters, most of them universities. Now, my gosh, Jason, we've got 70 companies around the Triangle area. That's a renaissance in a big way. We have people who come and locate here in the Research Triangle from all over the world. What happened? Our audiences got smarter.
Right.
Because they're coming from New York. They're coming from
internationally.
Paris. All over the place. They've seen art. They've seen the great museums. So our audiences have gotten more discerning. They're smarter. They're more intelligent. They want us to be better. Well, then we rise up and we meet that level, and it's a beautiful thing that begins to happen.
Symbiotic.
Yes, it is.
Push.
It is. It is.
Yep.
And I think, if we encourage that, if we nurture that and keep nurturing it, we're going to see an explosion of talent, and it's going to really, really touch lives and change hearts, which is why we're here.
Yeah.
I think people in our government have now realized the impact of the arts. If they don't understand the beauty of Shakespeare, they understand the tourist dollars that come in when people come to see a show. And through that, we get a respect and appreciation that maybe we haven't gotten before. So, again, as I said hours ago when we started this talk, sometimes
the sun has moved.
Yes, it has. I think the Christmas tree will be up.
Yeah.
But I think, we have to be willing to change ourselves before we can change other people. And I think artists are always willing to do that. They're always the proverbial disturbers of the peace. I think that's going to continue.
Yeah.
Well, we have to be. We push the parameters a bit.
Well, and then last main bullet point before we get to the quick shootout there, legacy, which you've already left, but as you're still here with us, which I'm grateful for, the whole community's grateful for, I know your family's grateful for. What do you think?
My legacy, I think my 3 children. They're my pride and joy. There's a theater that exists where one didn't exist before, and that's soul satisfying. I've seen so many young people come through the doors of the theater and go on to become wonderfully creative artists in their own right. You certainly one of them.
Thank you.
And that's so satisfying to me to sit back, because there comes a time our generation turns it over to you and your generation, and it's like, you got to carry the ball now. All we can do is try to send you out into the world armed with knowledge, with passion, with commitment, with all these things that you wanted to talk about today. Our job is to rattle on like I've been doing today. Hopefully there's a few things that you can glean out of it, and maybe there's 1 or 2 things you remember. We don't remember plays. We remember moments. And,
concepts.
And
like Aristotle or Plato.
Yeah. So
the theme.
You fire that shotgun and hope a pellet will hit, and somebody will take it, because sometimes that's all you need is that little pellet, that little grain of truth, that little spark of creativity, that little glimpse of beauty, and it changes everything.
Good news is we got it on tape.
Yes.
So we can go back over and over and over again and get more out of it, you know. That's awesome. So, finally, we've arrived to basically the end. The shootout. And then I have one, and you've kind of touched on this earlier, but I have one question that I always ask every single guest, and I'll be really, really curious to hear your answer to it. So I just got like 15 or 20 words here, really quick. I'll say one, and just say the first thing that comes to mind. Scrooge.
Fireplace.
We're done. I was not expecting that. That's awesome. That's profound. That's profound. That's I have no words. No words. Monologue.
Work.
No words. Audition.
Opportunity.
Yeah. Rehearsal.
Work.
If you had another one.
Joy. I love the rehearsal process. It's where you can make your mistakes. So it's joy, but it's work, you know.
Yeah.
You want to make it right. You want to make it good.
You got to make it right.
Yeah.
Piano.
Tears.
You're just like, I'm throwing them, and they're just coming right back. Shakespeare.
Red.
I'm losing. Dance.
Oh, tights. Oh, my gosh. Oh, I got baby blue tights when I took dance at School of the Arts because I had Scrooge legs then. So I said, if they're going to laugh at me, I'm going to wear baby blue tights and control the laughter. So I guess that's why it sticks.
Musicals.
Laughter.
I'm really interested about this one. Drama.
Knife.
This is a master class. Somebody better be taking notes out there. Comedy.
Red Skelton.
Directing.
Chair. I have a director's chair that I always sit in.
Does it have your name on it?
No, I don't have my name on it, but it's comfortable, and I like the light in it.
You know what we'll do? We'll just get a nice little Post-it note. Just put 3 eyes.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I should do that.
3 eyes and a smiley face.
Yeah.
Pain.
Heart.
Black box.
Joy.
Arena.
Lions. Critics.
Crew.
Smiles.
Yeah. They make or break.
Yep.
They really, and it's like Tom Hanks always talked about the hang. How it's like half the time when you do projects, it's all about the hang. It's not even about like the final product.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, again, with the Believers and Christmas Carol, it's just, you know, you leave, oh God, like just gut wrenching, even at 10 years old, just gut wrenching, leaving everybody after being in the family for 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
So difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Writer's block.
Typewriter.
Well,
I have an
Moody action on Californication.
Well, I have an old typewriter, and sometimes to break the block, I go back just to feel the pressure of those keys. It's interesting. Sometimes the dam breaks, and you have to try to do something different.
So you believe it's a thing then, writer's block? Because some people don't. I kind of don't, but I've been at that precipice where it's like, you know, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I think that's a good word, precipice. I think sometimes you're formulating inside yourself. I will consciously sit on an idea until I just got to pick up a pen or I got to sit at the computer to write. Some people might think that's writer's block, but I think you're consciously waiting for the grapes to ferment and turn into that wine.
You know, and I was going to say, when I was younger and I started writing, and there's always two schools of thought. You have the school of thought where right, and then be self-aware intrinsically and intuitively, and just know when to strike when the iron's hot. That's more of my school of thought.
Yep.
Because even just practicing scales and watching, it doesn't even matter what it is, Frasier or just something. If I have like an hour at the end of the day to just kind of run scales, just watch Netflix, kind of give my mind a break, the phone's always there with the voice recorder. I have thousands of 15, 30, 60-second bits that just happen. Mm-hmm. You archive them. Next thing you know, it's a song.
Sure.
So it's just, it's just an interesting. Everybody's got their own writing process. And
sure.
Whether block is a.
Well, I've always said, look, your job is to make the magic happen. How you do it's your own business, and everybody has their little ceremony, their little routine. Sure.
Yeah.
So you just have to embrace them all, and it's like, because you're
and
still
not judge yourself.
Exactly, because you, like I said, you can be your own worst critic, and that's
Get out of
where
your own way.
Yeah, that can paralyze you. And if anything is close to writer's block, too much self-thought, too much criticism, self-criticism can stymie you, and you want to just kind of blow the carbon out and just say, look, go for it, for it.
Right. Tech Week.
Ooh, sweat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was a barbershop down on Hillsborough Street in Raleigh when we used to have these horrendous tech days. I mean, all day long, sweating, working up in the rafters, hanging lights, painting. I'd go down to this barbershop and get a shampoo and a shave. And it was wonderful. They put those hot towels on your face and they shave
hot towel?
Yeah, it was just
hot towel.
I just walked out feeling kind of refreshed and renewed. It was, yeah.
It's the small things. It's the little things.
Made all the difference, man.
Hollywood.
Ooh, there's a tree, a magnolia tree. For some reason, I was out in Schwab's drugstore before they tore it down, historic spot in L.A., and I remembered that F. Scott Fitzgerald had his heart attack after buying a pack of cigarettes at Schwab's because he lived a block away. And I said, I got to go find where he lived. And I went down. I had his address in my wallet because I had been reading F. Scott, and I knew I was going to be in Hollywood, and I pulled it out. And in the yard where he lived, in the apartment where he lived, was a magnolia tree. And I went, well, of course, he's from the South. He's going to find a magnolia tree because while he's writing, he's smelling the magnolias. And I always thought, there's something about home. You can take us out of the South, but you can't take the South out of us, I guess. So for me, it was finding that magnolia tree, and I went, okay, I know what you did. I know what you did. You wanted to smell that scent of the South, which is a magnolia tree.
Improv.
Laughter.
Dialect / accents.
Olivier.
Yeah. Theater.
Soul.
Closing night.
Tears.
Well, I've got one other big question for you. If you could go back in time to your 15-year-old self in current day, well, you know what I mean. Go back now to that time frame at your age now. What would you tell that person?
It's going to be okay.
This has been basically 3 hours.
Oh my God.
We had a camera go down.
3 weeks.
I will be. I have to hunt down the other memory card. I had no idea that this was going to go as long as it did. I am immensely grateful for your time, and I want to thank you also for 15 plus years back. I don't know why this comes to mind, but making everybody do live auditions for Christmas Carol. That was, and I had been auditioning a lot at that time as a youth. But it really, you start youth and you start folks out right in community theater by throwing them in the fire. And you need to do it for yourself as a director and as a leader. But me looking back now, you know, because it was so horrifying as a kid. It's like, oh, I got to like sing in front of all these people. But that's the whole point. Because if you can't do it there, how are you going to do it in front of 2,500 if you can't do it for the 250 there or whatever it is, the number? But I just can't thank you enough for taking the risks that you've taken throughout your life, staying true to who you are. You've impacted millions, literally, and you're going to continue to do so. And when you're no longer with us, the legacy lives on. But I hope and I pray that you're here for quite a while longer.
Well, that's two of us. I love you, man. Thank you for today.
Love you too. Thanks so much. Well, what can we say? This has been an incredible time. I want to thank you guys for also, tuning in. If you've stuck with us for the entire 3 hours, congratulations. Go ahead and hit that like, subscribe button. We'll have some materials for you in the description box where you can purchase the novel and just some other events that are coming up. We can talk about that off camera, and we'll get all that squared away. But I think that's it, and I think we're out. We'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.